sliceofscifi.com.
Hey everyone, I'm Zoe Hewitt and welcome to another episode of Slice of Sci-Fi. Today we are at the Beverly Hills Hotel in ritzy Beverly Hills for the International 3D Society Creative Arts Awards. Now this organization has members in 20 countries around the world, including, of course, the US, and tonight they'll be honoring Ang Lee for his work on Life of Pi. I can't wait to learn more about 3D. So we're Slice of Sci-Fi. How would you say that 3D technology lends itself to sci-fi specifically?
I think 3D technology lends itself to movies specifically, but it's certainly good. It's great for sci-fi, but it depends on how you define sci-fi. Are we talking aliens? Are we talking future? So it lends itself to movies. 3D is a great tool that could be used to help tell a story, and sci-fi is a good story.
Well, do you think there are types of stories that lend themselves more to sci-fi then? Or excuse me, more to 3D specifically?
No, I think there are. I used to think that, but now I think that 3D is just a good tool for storytelling. In the old days, it was, you'd always say 3D is great for sci-fi because you could throw things at the audience, you could make them scarier, you could make the aliens bigger. But it's just such a good tool for storytelling. It works in all medium. Look at Great Gatsby, which is coming out, which is a straight romantic drama. So it really works for everything, but it does work very well for sci-fi.
It does, and I like that you mentioned movies specifically. Now, what about when The Hobbit, for instance, comes to television? Do you think we'll see a difference in the TV world? I mean, they have TVs now with the 3D glasses. Well, will we see a difference?
There'll be some difference when it comes to television because in 3D, the old phrase size matters actually means something. So, it's a little different experience at home than it is on a large movie screen, but it's still a great experience, just a little different.
Now, do you have a 3D TV at home?
Of course. Of course I do.
Just making sure.
I'm probably on my third generation 3D TV at home, but I'd have to be an early adopter. I'm in this business.
Exactly. But, some people surprise you, and then they're not early adopters. Now, when you watch 3D at home, do you feel like you can recreate the movie experience?
I don't know, because even watching a 2D movie in a theater and a 2D movie on television isn't a recreation of the experience. When I watch a movie at home, what I care about is it engaging? Is it a good story? I'm not trying to recreate a theater experience, because it's still a movie. So to me, it's just, am I going to enjoy this story? It's always about story.
It is, and the best movies have great stories, like The Hobbit. Congratulations on a wonderful movie.
And we did The Hobbit, too.
Oh, I know, that's why I'm bringing it up. And so what did you do that was different with the technology for The Hobbit that maybe we haven't seen since Amazing Spider-Man, for instance?
We pushed the technology further with automation, with speed, so it could be faster on set. And then, of course, for Hobbit, we had to develop a lot of wireless tools because Peter didn't want the cable going from his camera back somewhere. He wanted a free-ranging, free-roaming camera. So we developed the wireless side for that, and then, of course, it migrated over to all the other movies.
And for someone who might not know as much about 3D, when you refer to increasing the speed, what does that mean for the average viewer?
In the old days, when you would say we're going to shoot this movie in 3D, it meant we're going to double our production schedule, which on a movie is the most expensive part of making the movie, is the set time. So making a 3D movie is really scary to most producers because of how much more it would cost. So when I say it's faster, I mean at this point, with the technology, you could shoot a 3D movie on the same exact schedule as a 2D movie, so that's no longer one of the gating factors.
Very fascinating. Well, thank you, and congratulations again on The Hobbit.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good night. So first of all, congratulations on Life of Pi. The movie is gorgeous.
Oh, nice.
Now, how did you work with shooting 3D differently than you would have approached a film that's going to be in typical 2D?
Oh, definitely there's more, like the water was a big element, and I did tests for the water, and that definitely feels like the whole screen kind of folds forward. And there's different ways you want to stage the actors as far as being more aggressive, being forward of the screen, behind the screen, and just how the staging can definitely strike a different emotion on how the actor actually is. So there's definitely something more than just a stick in the face kind of thing, 3D that we wanted to present. We really wanted to kind of drive an emotional tone to the movie and have an arc and a whole. So the whole 3D of Life of Pi is scripted in a way that kind of, I don't know, I think people are kind of responding to. So I think we did well. My first one was Tron. That was my first 3D, and I think that's kind of what brought me on to Life of Pi.
I mean, both amazing movies. Now, I find it fascinating in Life of Pi that from what I understand, you did a lot of water tests, but in the end, it wound up becoming CG, right? Because the size and the perspective was wrong, is that right?
They did, yeah, I mean, we were in a tank, for one thing, so the water kind of mostly had to replace, but they had to keep the motion in the water and all the relative stuff, so that was a great base to kind of base all the water movement. I mean, Ang spent a lot of times with, wave engineers making sure that the wave tank and the motion was all correct for the waves that you wanted to be. So there was like 7 or, well, no more than that, maybe probably 15 different kind of wave patterns we picked for different scenes. And then there's different moments, and some was still, and there's also a lot of different looks of what we want to present, like the watercolor look of the sunset, or the flying fish, or the really hot day. They all have different kind of feelings of lighting-wise. And also those have different feelings of 3D. And what's great about 3D also as well is like, also you can make the ship, the boat seem very small in frame, which is a great way to make you feel like an emotional strike of being like, this boy's in the middle of nothing, he's small in the middle of this big vast thing. So that's a very interesting way you can kind of tell a story in a 3D language.
I mean, it's really fascinating, and the fact that the infinity perspective is so far out, did that affect how you shot things as well? So you didn't have sort of a compressed space where you had the characters?
We varied it on, for 3D, it's like an arc of any story in a way. You kind of treat it like you have moments where it crescendos a little bit more, and you have moments where it's not so shallow. But if you all keep it all the 3D at this kind of big level, it's not going to be really big, I mean, what's the reason why, like, the sunrise is so special in Life of Pi is because there's a lot of times where it's just, the lighting may not be as special for that one time. So and that's the way you treat 3D as well. You just have an arc to the whole thing, so.
I mean, really unbelievable. One last question for you. Sure. From what I understand, you jackhammered out a runway in Taiwan, and that's what the pool was. How deep was that?
3 meters deep.
3 meters.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time. I was spending careful, like orienting it with the sun, so there's big doors that open, could get real sunset, and there was like, there's a whole, I could create anything in there. It was a pretty amazing space. It was massive. I mean, there was rags and silks above that were like over a football field that we can cover and change the way the lighting kind of feels.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, thank you so much. It's a gorgeous movie. Congratulations. That. How did 3D technology change, or how has it evolved for that movie in particular?
I just think the form factor of cameras have evolved. I mean, 5 years ago, a rig was 90 to 120 pounds each. Peter used the Red Epic cameras on it, and they're down. He's doing Steadicam, handheld work. He did everything on that. So the form factor, the size of the cameras is getting smaller, and the sensors are getting bigger, which is more resolution. So it's all changing. You have manufacturers working on one side, and you have the 3D experts working on another to come together to make everything just a lot easier.
So how much testing did you do before shooting actually started to make sure that the technology was exactly as desired?
Well, 3Reality and Red came together, and we worked for, I'd say, over a year just to make sure that there was changes that fit us and what we need to do for Red. And then Peter, of course, I'm not even sure how long he tested, but I'm sure he tested for a year or two before he even went into that. So there was an awful lot of testing that went into everything.
And so when you watch 3D from older movies, older technology, does it bother you because now you're used to this wonderful technology and how great things can look?
I just thought about that today because I showed U2 3D in our theater to some press at 3Reality, and they said it's some of the best 3D in color they've ever seen. It's all about treatment. If you treat the movie right, the resolution doesn't matter. If you have a story, if you make the 3D right and make it comfortable for everyone, I think it works. So you can have a 5K sensor, a 2K sensor, a 4K sensor. I think the story is what matters. And if you make the good story, no one's going to care.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Have a great night. Nice to meet you. Beverly Hills, this is definitely the place to be at the 3D Awards.
That's right.
Now, what do you think is the coolest thing about how 3D technology has evolved over the years?
Well, it's kept me employed.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
We like employment here.
I think the coolest thing about it is that now it's accessible to everyone. We've got something like 40,000 digital 3D screens around the world and several million 3D televisions. So we've really got a platform for 3D to grow and thrive, and that's the most exciting development in my perception.
Well, do you have a 3D TV at home?
I do. I have many 3D TVs at home.
Many. So which type do you have? Because there are the two different types of glasses, right?
You're going to get me in trouble now. I have both types. I have both types, active and passive.
And how do you feel that it recreates, or does it, the actual movie experience?
Well, you know, I think what we're seeing now is TVs growing in size. I've seen a lot of 80-inch and 90-inch TVs, and you know, depending on how you're situating it in your living room or wherever you're watching TV, it can really fill your view, your field of view, in a very similar fashion to a movie theater screen. And I think we're getting a lot of the movie theater experience at home now.
Well, do you think that's going to affect people actually going to the movies then, if you can recreate your own 3D at home?
I think we're definitely at a crossroads where studios and theater owners and audiences need to, we really need to ratchet up the quality of the experience in the movie theater to keep people going to theaters. I think there's definitely a social component to going out to the movies, but certainly now more than ever, and it's a growing issue, there's so many options for entertainment at home. 3D television and you know, video gaming, of course, internet, social media. So the pressure is on for studios and filmmakers and theater owners to really deliver a quality product in all regards.
And how do you think, what is the difference in the quality product? What would get you to a movie theater as opposed to saying, hey, I've got all these 3D TVs at home, let me watch here?
I think what we need to see is innovations like laser projection, sound systems like Dolby Atmos that really recreate experiences that you can't easily get in the home. That's the key, is that the movie theaters have got to stay one step ahead of the home technology, and both are continually evolving. So it's going to be an exciting time.
Well, one last question for you then. You mentioned laser technology. For someone like me who isn't up on all the 3D technology, what does that mean? What would be the difference for me going into a theater with laser technology?
Well, laser projection technology is the next generation of digital projection, and it's going to mean much brighter, much sharper resolution. Really, brightness is the key. One of the challenges for theatrical exhibition in 3D has been the reduction of brightness due to the glasses and the filtration at the projector. So the hope is that laser projection is going to increase the output level to a sufficient brightness level that will really enhance people's enjoyment of 3D.
Oh, interesting. So light is really key. I didn't know that. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe. You're part of the team that created Transformers the Ride.
Excellent. So you guys are the team behind the awesome Transformers ride at Universal. Now, what went into making such a cool 3D ride?
Well, it took about 4 years to do it. We had to work with Michael Bay, which was really troublesome, but actually he was fantastic to work with. We worked with Hasbro, of course, who is behind the Transformers, and ILM. So we had a great team of people working on it, and we took 34 projectors and combined it with a flight simulator technology, and you get on this thing and you feel like you're really on an Autobot going through all these Decepticons that are attacking you. It's sensory overload. It's only at Universal Studios Hollywood, the entertainment capital of LA.
I like that tagline in there. Now, how does it compare? Universal Studios has Islands of Adventure in Florida, and they have that amazing Spider-Man ride, which is a really cool piece of technology as well. How did that technology influence what you did for Transformers?
Well, a lot of the technology, I like to think of Transformers kind of like Spider-Man 2.0. We got to take what we learned from that attraction, build on it, and make something even better. You know, we learned from, you know, how to integrate 3D with sets, with live action, with the ride vehicle, and really make it sing on this attraction.
I mean, it's so amazing to me because like that Spider-Man ride is about 10 years old now, but it still feels so fresh. So how else did you bring in some of the new elements to make this 2.0, as you said?
Well, you have to realize that Spider-Man is a tremendous comic book character, and so the look of that ride is completely different from Transformers the Ride 3D. Once you get on that ride, you feel as if you're in the real world, almost like you're actually entered into a Michael Bay film. And these giant 40-foot robots are actually grabbing your ride vehicle and shaking it. He's shooting at you, and you feel the heat of the 3D warheads going over your head. So it's an awesome experience. By the time you get off it, you have to write it again because so much happens to you, you can't remember everything that happens to you.
I imagine that's the case.
Yeah.
So how many different elements would you say there are? Like, I know when you're designing, right, you have all these different things you have to go through. Can you say off the top of your head there are like 100 different elements that happen in this ride? We're putting you on the spot now. We need a number. Slice of Sci-Fi wants a number.
Well, I can tell you, you go through the nest facility where the military is trying to fight the Decepticons. So that's the first place you go. And then you grab the Allspark, and then every Decepticon in the universe is after you. You leave there, you go through the streets, you're attacked by other Decepticons, then you go down into the subways, and you're attacked by Megatron, who grabs your ride vehicle, you spin around, and then you're actually launched up into the sky, and Devastator comes after you, and you end up actually going through the grinding blades of Devastator, and it's unlike anything you've ever experienced before. You have to go try it.
It sounds like it. Slice of Sci-Fi fans, this is the place to go. Transformers 3D The Ride. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
All right, thanks.
Slice of Sci-Fi fans, I am here with the man who knows movies. Now, Leonard, tell me, Life of Pi is a visually gorgeous movie, but when you saw it, how did you compare it to Avatar, which was also a 3D masterpiece?
Well, they're both great pieces of filmmaking. All I can say is I was lucky enough to see Life of Pi at its premiere at AFI Fest last fall at Grauman's Chinese Theater on that enormous screen. And I've heard that word immersive. I'm going to say this later tonight too. A lot of films use the word immersive. This really was an immersive experience. I felt like I really was in the movie, and it was an extraordinary experience.
And how do you think Ang Lee shot it differently to give you that experience? If he had shot it in just our typical 2D, would you have felt that?
I mean, it's clear that he, kind of like Scorsese last year, Martin Scorsese with Hugo, set up every single shot to take the best advantage of the dimensionality and the different planes of action and all of that. I think it's clear that it was conceived as a 3D movie and executed, because he did execute it as a 3D movie.
Well, then how do you feel when you see movies that have been turned into 3D? Do you feel like there's a difference?
Well, sometimes it fools me. I have been fooled, and some filmmakers say they actually prefer conversion because they feel they have more control. So, it really, all that matters is the result. If the result looks good, then it's successful.
Well, I'm asking you now, not just as a film critic, but as just a film watcher.
Right.
Do you feel a difference? Do you care if the movie has been converted?
No. I don't care. I don't care about that. I care about the result. I care if it looks good, if the 3D is effective, and a word I use, fun. If it's fun to watch in 3D, then that's all I care about.
Well, speaking of fun to watch 3D, Leonard has a Captain EO pin on his lapel here, and this is from the original movie premiere, and that was some original 3D action there.
I was at Disneyland the day they debuted it with my family, and we'll never forget it. It was such a cool day, and it's so neat to see, for the first time. It's fun to go back and revisit, but it's just a wonderful piece of 3D filmmaking and showmanship.
And do you feel like the fact that it's sort of the quote-unquote old-fashioned 3D, does that affect it, or is it still just as fresh?
I like old-fashioned 3D. I'm a booster of old-fashioned 3D. I don't find anything old-fashioned about old-fashioned 3D.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely fun. You've had some great experiences. Thank you for taking the time for Slice of Sci-Fi.
Yes, of course. If this guy wants to double, then Hi.
I know. So, we're Slice of Sci-Fi. How do you think that sci-fi lends itself to 3D in particular?
It's, sci-fi often talks about how we perceive the world. So 3D is just another way of showing how, we see things in different ways, and it kind of breaks down another variable to see things that you've never experienced before and actually experience the, all the details of how it lays out spatially.
Do you feel like when you go back and watch movies that have been converted to 3D, does that make a difference to you, or do you feel like movies that have been shot in 3D specifically versus converted are similar?
There's a difference shooting it natively. You get a lot more detail, but more importantly, more often when a movie is shot in 3D, the filmmakers have 3D in mind. So you can't, when you just convert a movie, a lot of times with 3D, it's better to have a longer shot or to think about cuts and do them in different ways than you might have done if it's going to be a 2D film. So a director who films it with 3D in mind ends up with a more pleasing result. In Life of Pi, that was one of the successes of the 3D, is that we had 3D in mind from the get-go. And then when you film it natively in 3D, you get details in the hair and details in composition that you wouldn't get in a conversion.
I mean, 3D, Life of Pi is so gorgeous. It's just breathtaking, the whole movie. You're just watching in rapture. Now, if the movie were converted back to 2D, let's say like on a television screen now, what do you think would be lost?
One of the biggest things that we lost, and this was something that we did a lot of research before we did the film. In fact, we went out in the middle of the ocean and really heavy waves, and I had a 2D camera and was taking pictures, and it looked awesome in my eyes, and then I take a picture and it completely flattened out. So a lot of the details of the ocean and that the subtleties and the waves that we put in are going to be harder to see in 2D. That's something that you really want to experience in 3D. And also, some of the emotional sense of the desolation that Pi feels when he's out in the middle of nowhere is really heightened by the 3D, and heightened by the sense that it really feels like a massive expanse of nothingness. And that will be lost on a 2D screen.
And that massive expanse of nothingness, how did the 3D affect that infinity into the horizon, like being able to shoot that distance?
Right. Well, we had to be very, you had to think about it with 3D, from a filmmaking standpoint, you have what's called a 3D budget. You can only use so much space, so we had to keep that in mind. We also wanted to think of when we had the tiger in the foreground, we wanted to make sure he had depth, and we wanted to sell the space. There's a lot of consideration that goes into 3D. So that's, again, back to thinking about 3D from the get-go. You want to think about those things as a filmmaker before you sit down and compose a shot, because it makes a difference.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure speaking. How did you look at filming 3D differently because of the beauty of the movie?
Well, at first I got into it not because of the beauty, because I think I want to make the water look more lively, immerse the audience more into Pi's world. That's why I get into it. And the color and the beauty of it, it basically is a new sense of sensation. I think it's a new cinematic language. It's fresh to us. We're still we're babies to that media. I think it's more sensational. It's more intense. It's something we should develop in the future.
Was 3D one of the reasons you agreed to do this movie?
Yes, because I thought it's kind of an unmakeable movie. It was actually a silly thought that if I add another dimension, maybe it's doable. But then, of course, the other dimension is 3D. And I just kept thinking about it, exploring new media. And I struggle with it. With anything new, you gotta struggle. It's inconvenient, but it's also inspiring. I think the thinking process really helped me to solve the problem making this movie. And also, it's a new sensation, especially the journey with Pi. Nothing like that. I don't see how the 2D is the same as 3D.
Definitely. Well, one last question. I know you need to get going in. We're Slice of Sci-Fi. How do you think Sci-Fi lends itself to 3D in particular?
Sci-Fi? I think anything can benefit from it. Depends on how you use it. It's neutral. It's a cinematic language. I tend to think not only sci-fi, especially drama, should really use it.
Well, thank you. Do you mind? Hey guys, thanks for joining me this evening. I don't know about you, but I have learned so much about 3D technology and specifically about how Life of Pi was shot. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Slice of Sci-Fi. I'm Zoe Hewitt. I'll see you next time.
SliceofSci-Fi.com